welcome to the new podcast exploring and cataloguing queer life. I'm your host, Cassidy Marler on the Lilac Archive, a dedicated audio space where queer individuals and organisations can show their work and contribution to queer culture in an evolving and collaborative format. Each episode will be joined by a guest, going through their interests, projects and passions, highlighting everyone from all aspects of queer identities. This is your first time listening. Grab a herbal tea or coffee, get comfy, and I hope you enjoy. Today we are joined by Gwen Howard, an actress currently in her final year of her degree down in Falmouth, Cornwall. She's performed in a variety of stage acts, short films, and even a drag show or two. She is here to shed some light on her creative process, as well as discuss the inherent queerness in acting. Gwen, welcome to the Like Archive. You're our first guest. How do you feel?
I feel good. I'm really excited.
I am too. So obviously you've done or are going to do a drag show or two.
Yeah, I've currently done one drag show. I'd like to do more. I'm very new into whole drag show thing, but yeah.
No, they're interesting. I always wonder what makes a drag show different from any other type of show in terms of just like feels very much like another element of theatre to me.
Yeah, it's a very particular kind of thing. I feel there's very particular tropes that come in drag. I guess mine was maybe a bit more sort of like a cabaret kind of thing, because it wasn't like a RuPaul's Drag Race kind of deal. It was more sort of like weird, sort of more drag king sort of influences, I guess.
Because of course there's a difference between the traditional thing we see on RuPaul with drag queens and of course drag kings. It's a very different mark in how they perform. But moving on to our first question, what drew you to acting? What was the first time you thought, I really want to be an actor specifically, rather than just, I like performing and seeing people on stage?
It was a very particular thing where I was early secondary school. I want to say me and my parents went to my stepnan's for the weekend, and we ended up seeing a stage production of Jeeves and Wooster, which is like some old comedy show that Stephen Fry was in, I think. We saw it and I was so enamored by it. It was so funny, and I just saw the actors. I could see they were having a really fun time, and I just remember like the show ending, and I turned to my dad and I was like, I think I want to be an actor. Like, and that was really the moment that kind of changed it. And like since then, it's sort of like I've gone down a very different route to like comedy. I'm very much like I like Shakespeare. I like drag. I like that voice acting kind of stuff. That's sort of my forte. But yeah, that's sort of where it came from.
Almost a mix of the things that are going out of style, I feel, of things that are more traditional, less flashy, but they're more about the performance and the craft of it, rather than a very popularized version of like what it means to be an actor.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
That being said, are there any current projects you're involved in? Because I know we were actually involved with the short film
yes.
a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Currently, in terms of stuff I'm doing outside of studies, not really. Me and Ollie had an idea for a show that it's Macbeth, but it's done through sort of like WWE style wrestling.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So like that was actually just an idea we had. I don't know if we are going to do it or not.
That would be it'd be fascinating if you did.
To completely like rewrite the script and everything.
I think it'd be beautiful. That's a beautiful idea of combining. That's again a combination of something very traditional with something very modern. Also, if those who don't know, Ollie is our mutual friend. She is on the TV course at Falmouth, so she is more involved in the writing and the production of things. But yeah, I mean, I know that we did do a short film, which I'll mention. Yes. Did a short Star Trek film together, which was quite fun, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun on that shoot. Like screen acting is something that I have kind of struggled with. But like that shoot and another shoot that I did before, which is with some of the same people on the TV course, was really nice and cool and fun, and I really liked it.
Do you like that kind of camaraderie of acting and the general filming process of any performance, that you're a team together?
Oh yeah, definitely. I find sometimes with screen acting it can be quite isolating because you're kind of doing all the prep beforehand on your own, like you're sort of just expected to come to set and just sort of do it, and there's no sort of, screen is very different from stage and the fact that like with stage you often like you have a whole rehearsal process and people get used to each other in a way I don't think you get for screen, but like when that camaraderie is there, when it's like you know on that set we were all kind of like joking and like and like coming up with weird bits about our particular characters and stuff, and like when it's there I feel like that makes the acting a lot better because you're all much more comfortable with each other, I feel.
Leading on to that, what is your creative process for performance? Is it very personal? Do you go through a lot of like, not necessarily solitary, but do you go through more of a personal approach of building up your own performance, or is it more group and complementary where you're looking to what other people are doing? How can you fit into what they're bringing to performance and working as a whole?
It's sort of a mix of the two, because you do need to, focus on your own craft, and you've got to make sure that you're doing the best that you can be. You've got to make sure your voice and your body are all warmed up and you're able to like go to whatever particular weird extremes that particular script requires of you. But it's also like, getting in tune with everyone else, because I actually did an intimacy coordination workshop like last week. And that was very, you have to take a lot of time with the other person, sort of getting to know like what they're comfortable with, and like all that stuff with consent and stuff like that, and then building that little scene together. And so it's sort of like you need to work on your own stuff so that you can then come to the group and go, okay, let's all work on this together.
Very glad you did mention intimacy coordination, because that's something that is I feel being brought more and more into acting. People are realizing you can't just have these scenes, you need the process behind it. You need both actors or however many in the scene to be comfortable with it.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
It's interesting you guys actually get taught that. I for some reason thought you wouldn't.
Well, it was an optional workshop, which I think really should be mandatory, and it should have, like, we shouldn't have had to wait until our third year for it to happen. And that's something that Rose Ryan, the intimacy coordinator, was talking about. People at the university was asking her, okay, when do we need to start doing intimate? And she was like, do basic consent shit like first week basically of year one, and then do sort of the more intricate intimacy stuff, like really sort of working on it beginning of year two, basically. And so like I feel like our workshop was very much like a sort of trial for what could be better. But that is the thing, like this, like intimacy coordination is a very new thing, basically, and I'm very glad it's new. It's here and it's getting more integrated into the industry.
It does feel like acting feels like a thing that consent is baked into. Because you're I say two people. I'm imagining it's a scene of two people. Two people on a stage or a screen together. That's you need that. You need the other person to go along with what you're saying, to go along, even just in a regular scene that doesn't involve any intimacy. You need the other person to go along with what you're going to do. And it's a very, what's the term? I'm going to say complimentary until I think of a better word, but it's a very interactive format.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming away from that intimacy workshop, I was like, oh, you can absolutely apply this to most acting. Like there's so much intimacy in just like a simple thing of like two people holding hands, or if there's a parent-child relationship between two characters, like that requires intimacy. Like
especially those, I would feel.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's like a psychological intimacy of you're acting someone who knows this person on a deeper level than you reasonably would in real life. So I think that's definitely something. I always find with creative process, I'm a graphic designer.
Yeah.
And our creative process is very introspective. You do everything, it's your own thing until you get group work, and that's seen as something entirely different. So it's really fascinating to see that acting, that it's in your case very much a mixture of both worlds, and you have such an interactive course where I think in general we don't tend to think of performance as an art, but it is. You're honing it like a very physical artistry to anyone.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I think like that's acting is just one art form. It's probably one of the longest lasting art forms has existed. So it's something that like one of my lecturers, Mark, has been saying like back at the end of second year we did a Shakespeare module, and he was like, acting is this grand 2,000 plus year tradition that you have the privilege to be able to partake in. And I think that's something I feel like more people should, at the very least, if you're getting into acting, you should really think about that and consider that. I personally ascribe to it as well. I can see how other people may be like, nah, it's whatever, it's cool, whatever.
It's a great tradition that we've had, especially I feel in the context of English acting for a while.
Yeah.
You had things like Shakespeare, cabarets, and just I feel like I was going to say drag again. My mind is on track today.
Yeah.
That we've had here. That even like going back to little jester plays and medieval courts.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There is a dedicated, as you said, 2,000 year long art to it. My next question was going to be, do you ever see performance as a form of personal discovery in terms of yourself, or more broadly for other people? And it doesn't have to always be identity-based. If it is identity-based, then that'd be great. But also in terms of just you as a person, when you perform, do you see that as I'm discovering more about myself by inhabiting this character and by playing them in any way?
Yeah, definitely. I think taking on all these different being different characters, and you're exploring them and you're trying to understand them as much as you possibly can, because the more you understand the character, the more you're able to be them, act as them. It's specific words like that are very difficult. Doing that sort of stuff, I feel like you kind of naturally sort of discover at least a little something about yourself each time. I feel like every as long as it wasn't like a very small little thing, every decent sized production that I've done or character that I've sort of explored, I've taken something from it. And I've gone, oh, okay, that's something to consider for the future. And then it's self-discovery through discovery of other people, I guess.
That's really nicely worded.
Yeah,
I would agree with you on that one in terms of the self-discovery through discovery for other people. Do you think through acting you can, in a inherently queer sense, you can act and then you've acted a particular character come out from that in any way? I know we have the controversy of can straight actors play gay characters, but there might be an element of someone acting a character and then really that resonating with them and then realizing, oh, maybe that experience led them to realize that they are in fact gay because they've had that intrinsic experience of acting with that character.
It's an interesting question. I'm not really sure how to answer it.
Stumped you on this one.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Could you like rephrase the question a little bit?
As in the idea that like you, okay, I think we're going to move away from the controversy of straight men.
Yeah.
But more as in you play a character who's a bit queer coded.
Yeah.
And you inhabit that character and you think, oh, actually, I really resonate with a lot of these things this character does in my own personal life. And through playing that and through the actor performing another person, you would think, oh, actually, that has truth in my own part of my identity as well.
I think that's definitely true for people, probably. Personally, I don't think, at least in terms of acting as a career acting, I guess I haven't really experienced that. I guess I think something that is very, how do I segue onto this? Dungeons and Dragons, right?
D&D.
Yes.
Okay, D&D.
Yes. What people are doing in D&D is a form of acting. It's
I would agree with you there. D&D is very much a form of acting.
Yeah. In that you have many examples of queer people playing D&D, playing someone who isn't like themselves or how they view themselves, and then they go, oh wait, this is like there's something here, and I think that's definitely true in terms of quote unquote professional career acting, I guess.
Do you think in D&D is because you have a sense of ownership over the character, that you the decisions are all self-directed, you yourself will make that decision in consultation with the DM sometimes, where you say, oh, my character could be bi or could be gay, and you move from that, my character has this identity, it's taken on by you for the little nuances you notice in the character, the kind of, you have this vision of what they're going to do, who they're going to be, and then naturally a lot of us, we self-impose on our D&D characters, they're self-inserts, definitely. And so they kind of
especially early on,
that kind of comes over to the real world, where you go, oh well, been inhabiting this character for so long in D&D, a lot of those traits and mannerisms have come over now.
Yeah, definitely. The example that I'm thinking of in terms of my D&D characters is my character Masha, who is
very good name, Masha, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I stole it from a Chekhov play. God, that was a while ago. Yeah. Anyway, but Masha. In the campaign, this has been a campaign that's been going on for like a few years. Like Ollie's been DMing it. She's amazing. And she has adopted a little kobold son called Monty, and it's really interesting, I guess, especially as a trans woman existing sort of in this space of like motherhood. It's quite, and I was like, it's like, oh, I have motherly feelings for this little kobold child. Like I was like, that's a very interesting part of me that I never sort of explored before. You know, going, okay, like because like, you know, this is getting into like very personal things of like whether I want kids in the future.
Well, no, I feel like those things are inherent in character for anyone. I mean, someone play a parent on TV or film and then realize, oh, that experience made me really want kids. Yeah, I think it's things like that I think you would see most often in going over from a character. Yeah. Like I'm realizing I do often get typecast as like a mum character quite a lot. I can see that. You have the mum jumper on. Yeah, thank you. My God, I'm remembering secondary school pride group. Everyone, like all the little like year 7s and 8 queer kids like would always call me mum. I'm like maybe there's something here. I mean, so some of the mums I've played have been like really bad at being mums. Like it's like, funnily enough, Masha from the Chekhov play The Seagull I've heard of The Seagull play. Becomes a mum like later on in the play. She's really bad at it. She's completely dissociated. I think playing her at that point, back in year 1, was very sort of connected to how I felt about motherhood at the time, which was very much like, nope, don't want kids, definitely not, absolutely never happening. But now, like, sort of, you know, playing Masha and sort of exploring that sort of like part of me, I'm like, okay, maybe in the future, not now, definitely not now, but like someday, maybe. Yeah, I think it's definitely like a wait till mid-30s, early 40s, wait till you're settled. That's quite, I feel like the age span of when people have kids is quite late, I feel. I'm going into the acting profession. Among other creative things like tabletop role-playing games, my job prospects are not particularly stable. It's literally, you do a job for like a few months, you get fired, and then you have to apply for another job, and that is just how it's expected to go. It's very strange. I wouldn't wish it on my greatest enemy. Well, that being said, do you see any elements of queerness in acting through what we're just talking about in terms of putting elements onto a character, or the actual, maybe a bit more conceptual, but the actual process of playing someone else?
That is a good question, because I guess for me, acting, you know, playing other people, I'm bringing my experience as a trans woman into this character, and so I sort of naturally look at characters through that lens, I guess. Like for example, like for my Shakespeare module, I ended up playing Richard of Gloucester, who ends up becoming Richard III in one of Shakespeare's plays that no one has ever heard of, Henry VI Part 3. No one's heard of it. It's bad. It's very boring. Richard has this particular speech at the end, near the end, like after he's like killed King Henry. He's talking about because Richard III had like, I believe it was like scoliosis or something. Shakespeare kind of took that and like made it a much bigger thing, and like it was, the plays were written as like I can't remember the specific house name, but like anti-Richard propaganda, basically. He's like he's evil. He's the most evil person ever. But I read that specific script, that specific monologue, and I was going, oh, I can kind of fucking relate to what he's talking about. But like having his body being viewed as inherently evil. He's been villainized his entire life because of his body, and because of that, there's a level of rage about that. And I was like, as a trans woman, I can kind of relate to this. And so I played that as a woman, as a sort of closeted, eggy trans woman. I feel like just inherently, but for me at least, acting as different people, I am bringing queerness into it, I guess.
So it starts more from your interpretation.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true for all queer actors?
I'm not sure, because like I know there are trans and queer artists who like me, that are sort of like their queerness is an inherent thing that they want to explore in their art. But I know a few who are like, nah, I have no interest in exploring queerness or whatever in my art or whatever. I have other priorities, I guess, when it comes to that. So I guess it depends on the person. But then again, if you identify as one gender and you're playing a character who is another, and you're playing them as that gender that is written in the script, I guess there is an inherently transy kind of vibe to it. You know, the entire concept of like gender swapping characters and whatever. It's a thing that's a part of the acting tradition that has existed for a very long time. Shakespeare's plays, you know, at the time, women were not allowed to be actors. It was illegal for them to be actors.
They had to have the men play all the roles.
Yeah.
And you get this very interesting thing where you've got men playing women's roles, often quite convincingly.
It was often like that, like the younger, almost like teenage boys, or even younger, because you know their voices haven't dropped or whatever, and so they can get more higher pitched or whatever with stuff, and so like I feel like in that sense there is an inherent sort of level of queerness, but also even if the actor isn't necessarily considering that at the time, that's a particular choice that I think, however you kind of slice it, it kind of becomes queer in one way or another.
There are so many things that are inherently, you have the things that are very obviously queer, the queer label written directly on them. Yeah. You have other things that are queer in a much more kind of tangential way. When you look at them and you realize, I can see how a queer person doing that would make it inherently queer. Despite the fact if they intend it or not. Or I can see how everyone else engaging in that might not understand the queerness of it. But there is that sense, I think it's all those transformative elements of gender swapping characters, playing the gender swap characters, the character they're being gender swapped to. And those little things that make up this sort of performance. Even, I'm going to go back to drag now, but even a cis woman playing in drag is inherently queer. You're commenting on gender presentation, and everything that goes along with it, identity and stereotypes. So there are these inherent things in performance, from my view, that, and I think from what you said as well, that make it queer. But it's not. It's not exactly a surface queerness. It's a deeper sort of one. You have to get it a little.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my dissertation actually is talking about this quite a lot, actually, about, I guess the example I'm thinking of is the trill in Star Trek.
Yes, I was going to mention earlier, Star Trek in acting. I know you're a massive Star Trek fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the trill were created by Michelle Horvat, I believe, who is a cisgender gay man. Did not intend like transness in his story at all. Like the trill were inspired by clownfish and cleaner shrimp.
I would say those two are very trans.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Am I thinking of seahorses? My apologies. I think I'm thinking of seahorses, but yeah.
Yeah. And you know the clownfish are able to biologically change their sex, and cleaner shrimp, and they have a symbiotic relationship with cleaner shrimp that clean them of all.
Yes, that's the symbiote. This is the symbiote. Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, if you go back and watch that original Next Generation episode, The Host, the episode is a lot. Season 4, episode 23. Yes.
I'm glad one of us that was good at it.
Yeah, I only know this because it's part of my dissertation. I had to look it up. There wasn't off the cut. The episode is a lot more focused on Beverly's sexuality in relation to Odan, who is the.
They have a weird part on the episode, if I remember correctly, where so she meets Odan as a man, and she's like, "Oh, I really love him." Yeah, and then a symbiote has to change host, and Odan's now a woman, and she has this really conflicted feeling at the end. Yeah, she's like, "I just can't love you anymore." Which I thought for 24th century Star Trek, is that really an issue anymore? Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange to me to put that in a very 80s, 90s social context.
Odan gets lethally killed in a shuttle accident, and then the symbiont has to be transferred into Riker, and then at the very end, it's revealed that the replacement Trill is a woman. It's interesting. I was listening to an interview with the writer about this. It's the only interview that I've been able to find, apart from one. It's from like a magazine that I haven't been able to access yet. We're working on it. He was saying that like, you know, he sort of was viewing Beverly while Beverly is, the episode has been criticized for homophobia. He sort of viewed it as Beverly is the audience insert character. And so like, you know, she's saying like, oh, at this point we are like, humanity isn't ready to love in the same way that the Trill do, but someday we will. He was saying in the interview, you know, as a gay man, he's very aware of the difficulties that people have in exploring sexuality and gender, and that's something that he wanted to explore. And that quite interesting. It was like gender was sort of on his mind, but not specifically transness.
I feel like the trans element of the Trill is, if you watch the Star Trek episodes, it's very evident in my opinion. But
absolutely.
They've always been used as a lens for exploration of sexuality. The episode, it's in season 4. Rejoined. I'm going to say season 4, episode 2. It's episode maybe 3. It's been a while.
Something like that.
And the whole lens is that, spoilers for Star Trek DS9, by the way. If anyone does want to watch it, go watch it. It's great.
Yeah.
It's one of the best Star Trek shows, but
it's the best Star Trek show.
It is, well, yeah, in my
Depending
opinion.
on who you ask.
The whole episode hinges on the fact that Jadzia Dax and Trill is meeting up with someone who she knew in a previous life as one of her previous hosts, like Torias or whatever.
Yeah, it was Torias.
And so the whole episode hinges on she meets Dr. Khan, Ladara Khan, and in our minds we're going, oh my God, they're two women. It's the episode saying it's a two-woman can't kiss, and it's this like big thing, which that's our insert. I mean, and in the universe, they knew each other beforehand and they shouldn't re-fraternize. And
it's something with like Trill society. You're not allowed to
and we view this
remarry or some shit.
Yeah, you're not allowed to remarry like people who your previous host had a relationship with, which I get it kind of makes sense from some sort of genetic point of view, but
I don't know.
Anyway, and so you have this it's like Trill having new experiences, but we imposed on this, oh my God, the two women, it's like 96, and you're like, oh my God, two women are kissing, this is insane. It's crazy. But I watch that now and I'm like, this is like a very classic lesbian love story. I don't know.
Definitely.
I don't know the other way, and of course it's written that way. But yeah, and there is, especially in Jadzia, an element of transness because Cisco still remembers her as Curzon, and he calls her old man, and she's fine with it. It's kind of a part of the friendship, and this element of characters recognizing her as cousin beforehand and going off of that. And then when we go to the later seasons of Ezri, that's a whole thing.
Oh yeah, God,
that's a whole. We could have a whole episode on that.
Yeah, it's crazy because like again, this is part of my dissertation. I've been doing research into this. I can't find anything that suggests that the writers of DS9 knew that this was a trans allegory while they were making it.
I don't think they would have. I don't think it would have been in their minds to go, well, this is a trans thing. I think they were just thinking,
this is the logical sort of exploration of the Trill, I guess.
Yeah.
Terry Farrell, who is the actress who plays Jadzia Dax, sort of later on like did an interview and she was like, oh yeah, I'm really glad that Jadzia was able to be this sort of like great piece of queer representation at that time, and so like you often find people like the creators sort of like looking back in retrospect and going, oh yeah, I guess we did do something there.
Yeah, changing times, I guess. Yeah, things have moved on for the 90s, so you would, viewing it for everyone lens, you'd see it and go, oh, that was obviously a trans thing, rather than in the 90s I think it was more focused on sexuality. Are there any queer actors that inspire you through just their performances, them as individuals, or how they bring their queerness to the acting and how they almost act as, not necessarily a role model, but someone to look up to and say, you can be queer in this space and you can be successful because of it?
Generally don't really think about like, oh, which actors like inspire me, I guess. What's his name? Elliot Page, for example. Really sort of like that whole thing with the Umbrella Academy and how they sort of dealt with, Elliot coming out as trans. They were like, okay, well, let's make Victor also trans.
I think that was a really good decision on that.
Yeah, and like it's just nice that you can just do that. And I felt like that was definitely sort of like a bit of a sort of like eye-opening thing for like a lot of people, both like sort of in the industry and whatever. That's just like, oh yeah, you can just trans characters. It's cool. You can do it.
I recently read Elliot Page's book. His memoir, Page Boy. I've really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done and it really portrayed his experience with
queerness and transness. It's I think it's quite a personal read. I really enjoyed it. It's just a way, there's a sincerity in the way he writes that I felt was very like, this is someone finding it into the story and finally spilling it all on the page. And I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I think, oh God, what's her name? Aubrey Plaza? Aubrey Plaza. Yes. Because me and my girlfriend recently finished watching Agatha All Along, which is very gay. I'm pretty sure Aubrey's bisexual, I believe.
I think so. I think she hasn't, I don't know if she stated in interviews that she is bisexual. I don't know when she came out.
That show is just like, it's queer people sort of reveling in their queerness. I feel like there's a lot of just like that kind of the just absolute toxic lesbian exes between Aubrey and oh God, what was Agatha's actor called?
Catherine Hahn.
Between then, oh my God, chef's kiss. So good. And I was like, I'm gay. I'm very gay. That whole sort of show, I think, was really, really good, apart from the ending. I didn't like the ending. That's a whole other thing. Like, even in the fact that the character of Teen, I'll call him Teen because it's spoilers for what his actual name is. That character, like, I remember reading on Tumblr, because unfortunately I'm a Tumblr girly.
No shades at Tumblr girlies.
Yeah,
okay.
But I remember reading on there that they were like, they saw the character of Teen as a bit of a trans allegory, and watching the episodes, I was like, oh yeah, I can see that, and sort of how that show is able to deal in both explicit queerness between Rio and Agatha, and in like non-explicit queerness / exploration of Teen, even though Teen is also gay, he's also a little transy, and I think that's cool.
It's interesting that you did mention Aubrey Plaza as someone who has very much owned her bisexuality.
Yeah.
It's someone who I think is similar has been Stephanie Beatrice, because it was the way that she was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I think she came out as bi at roughly the same time, or she married her wife at the same time. And in the season 5, he just goes, Rosa on Brooklyn Nine-Nine is bisexual. We're going to have an episode about it, and it's a very emotional coming out scene.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the whole show.
Oh God, yeah.
And it's someone else very similar to that who is obviously taken their sexuality and gone, actually, I'm going to be proud of it, and I'm going to make it a part of my work, and I'm going to make it intrinsic to who I am in a professional sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's someone else I just thought of. Is it Hunter Schafer?
I was going to ask you, Hunter Schafer.
I don't know much about her.
I was getting onto this. I personally love Hunter Schafer in the way that she's very, I was going to say unabashedly trans.
Yeah.
She's played a lot of trans roles, and then recently she said, I'm not going to play any trans roles actually. I'm going to play roles that are just cis women, because I don't want to be typecast into this and be the only trans actor you have or the only trans character you have. And empowering studios to do a bit more, which I really found quite reasonable of her to ask for that. She's not the only trans actress. I was also going to ask you if you knew Belle Priestley, who's a British trans actress. She's up and coming. I think she may also be a singer. There are a few. Someone who is just related is Alex Consani, who, I don't know if you do know, she's a model. She's the first trans woman to win Model of the Year.
Oh, cool.
Again, someone who is in that kind of creative adjacent space.
Yeah, but that whole thing with Hunter Schafer, like being a trans actor who is like, no, I'm gonna just play not just play cis women, but like I feel like it's very much like I'm gonna play women, but the cisness or transness doesn't really come into it. It's
she's no longer
like,
gonna be the only trans person. She's just saying like, no, my characters can be anything.
Yeah,
it was needed of her.
Yeah, it's like, I do not remember her name. There was a trans actress in the Barbie movie where she was just one of the Barbies, and the fact that she is an actress is trans does not come up at all.
I do know who you're talking about. I'm struggling to remember the name. It's not Nava Mao?
I have no idea.
I do know who you're on about, though. That's something for editing me to find out.
Editing me here. The actor we're actually talking about here is Harry Neff, not Nava Mao. They're both trans actors, however. Harry Neff, having obviously played the Barbie doctor in the Barbie film, and Nava Mao plays the character of Terry in the series Baby Reindeer. What's interesting is that Nava Mao has only ever played trans characters in her productions, and I think I got confused between the two because I was recently looking at a post from the US-based magazine Them, specifically talking about Nava Mao and her representation representation through her character on Baby Reindeer. But that's just to clear that up. And now back to the interview.
That is an interesting sort of thing that trans actors are starting to explore, I think.
I am really proud of them for doing that. There's nothing wrong with playing a trans character. I think we do need more trans characters on screen. But if you've had your whole career of you played trans character after trans character, and now you're like, I need to evolve from this, not only professionally, but also personally, then go for it, And it forces studios to be a bit more clever in their casting and a bit more clever in their storylines, rather than relying on the crux of, we need a trans character, and it's going to be Hunter Schafer again, and it's going to be the same storyline as last time, the same thing, and Hunter Schafer's going to go, no, you need to evolve from this thinking and actually have a story where the transness is intrinsically to it, and it's much more ingrained, or the character be trans and it's just not a part of the story. It just is a thing.
Absolutely. Like, I think it's a very interesting sort of thing, because like we've I remember sort of like, I think it used to be a sort of thing where it was like, okay, we're gonna have trans characters, but they're often played by cis actors, which I'm personally, I'm of the opinion that I don't think cis actors should play trans characters, at least currently right now. I think...
Gonna say I'm currently watching Twin Peaks.
Right.
And coming up is, spoilers for Twin Peaks, David Duchovny. I'm using his name as it is pronounced in Czech. I don't know, but David Duchovny doesn't sit right with me as a pronunciation.
Yeah.
He's meant to be playing a trans woman in it.
Right.
Apparently it's quite a respectful portrayal. So that's one thing where I'm like, potentially. I've got to see how that plays out on screen. But I do get your thing of, not right now. I think we need to give trans people more agency in the characters they play.
Yeah, we've sort of gone through this thing of like, trans characters being played by cis actors, and then, trans people and trans allies being like, no, you should probably be casting trans actors for those roles, because one, trans people are just generally going to have a better understanding of the trans narrative, of all of the trans experience, I mean. And two, trans actors are generally going to struggle to find jobs, because we are like, it's like, oh, well, you're trans, so you can only play trans characters, and so like, it's like, okay, maybe we should give trans people the actual space to do that. But now we're sort of seeing this thing of like, trans people can play cis roles, and that's cool and that's fine, and like no one, well there are people who bat an eye on it, but like we don't
in general. No one.
It's like, you can do that, and it doesn't have to be brought up or whatever. It's just this character's a woman, or this character's a man, or this character's non-binary or whatever. We don't need to discuss that in the narrative itself or whatever. I don't think we've really sort of seen... We probably have. I just maybe have missed it or whatever. But I haven't necessarily seen a lot, like tons and tons and tons of trans actors playing trans characters. Like, they have popped up, like with Elliot Page in Umbrella Academy, and like... So some other places probably. Yeah, it's interesting that that's sort of like what we're exploring now versus before. And I feel also in terms of like film and TV and whatever, it's often trans narratives are sort of being explored by trans directors and trans writers. Like,
yes, I was going to mention the idea of having trans people in the director's chair, in the writer's room. Does that influence your decision of that? Because if you have a trans director or a trans writer, and you have a cis character, cis actor playing a trans character, does that change it? Because then you do have a trans person making the decisions around this character.
Yeah, I think with that, I feel like at that point, it's really up to the director and the writer's discretion in terms of casting, because like, they know the kind of narrative they want to tell. It's like, I'm thinking specifically of I Saw the TV Glow.
That is probably the queerest film that's been put out in a while.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's so good. Oh my God. And I'm pretty sure all the actors like of like the two main leads they're all cisgender, but the characters that they're playing they're not explicitly trans, but it is a trans narrative that is being told. I find that interesting. I don't know what specifically to say about it, but like that whole sort of like
that melding of the cis actors in a very trans narrative.
Yeah,
almost. I think it's something that we need.
Yeah,
we need to see that the lines blur between cis and trans in acting. Kind of very arbitrary. They don't need to exist.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of like a sort of non-explicit sort of trans narrative, because it's like, as as trans people, speaking for me, I was like, there is no way that you can watch this and not think it's a trans narrative. But I'm sure there's a lot of cis people who probably watched it and did not get that at all. It was just like, oh, this is a spooky movie.
It's a spooky movie.
It's a spooky movie.
The TV is glowing. It's crazy.
Oh my god. Like it's sort of...
It's almost like with the new Wicked film where people have said this is an obvious allegory against fascism, and people are going, no, it's an allegory against the left. And I'm like, I think this is an allegory against unchecked power, surely.
Yeah.
That's a thing that's universal to anyone.
Yeah.
And that whole thing, and obviously, I think in the current climate, Wicked is rated in. If you view it, I think it probably is an allegory against fascism. I haven't actually seen it yet, but from the reviews I've read, I'm like, yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, because I've seen the stage play. I've done a very cut up version of the stage play that was bad. Sorry, The Space, but I know that the book I think goes a lot more into the sort of anti-fascist talking points and stuff. But I haven't seen the movie. I assume it's basically just a one-to-one recreation of the stage play or something.
I haven't actually seen it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of reviews of it. Yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast as a guest.
Yeah, no problem.
Guest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Do you want to plug anything you're currently working on? Any socials you have?
Oh gosh, yes. Instagram, I guess. That's a good place where
That's a good place.
Sort of am. I post on there occasionally. So yeah, my Instagram is Gwendol _the _Goblin. I also have an art account, Gwen Goblin Art, which is all one word. Anything else? I think that's probably it. But yeah, I don't really have any particular projects that I'm working on at the moment. I do actually make tabletop role-playing games. This is completely different, completely separate from acting. But I'm very new to the space. But I do have a tabletop role-playing game zine called Burn Barrow. It's sort of post-apocalyptic capitalist hell kind of deal. So if that sounds interesting, where you do awful capitalism over and over again, Burn Barrow. It's on itch.io. Gwendol _the _Goblin, probably. Some variation of those words also being sold at Rubicund.
Oh.
Yeah, the
Rubicund is a small queer-owned anarchist bookshop, little cafe as well.
Yeah, which is really cool.
I've got to check that out.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, thank you very much for being on again. Go and check her stuff out on Instagram, and I can't wait for more of your tabletop games that you're going to release.
Thank you.
Find us wherever you get your podcasts from. We're on Spotify, Apple, and Pocket Casts, just to name a few. I particularly like using Pocket Casts. This isn't sponsored or anything. They're my personal favourite. Listen to us on any platform that you use. Thank you to Gwen for being our first guest on the archive, and thank you for listening. I hope that this was both an entertaining and informative introduction to the wide variety of culture and queer life. If you have any suggestions for individuals or organisations, or if you yourself want to be in the podcast, write into lilacarchive@podcast.com. We'll be back in the next episode with the newest instalment in the archive. Till then, stay tuned.